And welcome San Diego Rotary Club 33 members, our honored guests, and those watching on Zoom to the 33rd oldest, the 10th largest, and the first best Rotary Club in the world. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Brian Verhooy for his gift of music to welcome us today. And now from the class of 2023, Paula Lemkuhl is here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Paula, before you leave, all of you who read my email, read Paula's message about today's program, I want to thank you for your courage in sharing that all with us, and just a reminder that these programs mean something to somebody. Let's give Paula a big hand. Thank you, Paula. And now for our program. Our chair of the day today is from Rotary Class of 2021, David Finn. David has been a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office in San Diego for almost 13 years. David recently co-founded the San Diego Federal Bar Foundation that raises money for charitable causes in the legal community. He volunteers as a CASA with Voices for Children and is a longtime supporter of Reality Changers. David's daughter is turning 5 next week, and guess where they're going to go? They're going to Disneyland. Please welcome David Finn.
Thank you, President Michael. I have the pleasure today of introducing 2 friends that work with me at the United States Attorney's Office. And I could speak volumes about their accomplishments and the wonderful gentlemen that they are. First, Dylan Aste serves as the Civil Division Opioid Coordinator at the United States Attorney's Office. Dylan's a native San Diegan and went to high school at the Orange Glen High School in Escondido. He attended San Diego State University and is a self-described SDSU superfan for life. So, Dylan is very active in the legal community and volunteers quite a bit of his time. And if I were to list it all, we would be here much longer. Second is Aste and Gordon, who serves as the office's Criminal Division Opioid Coordinator. Adam previously served at the District Attorney's Office and was a member of the Downtown Breakfast Rotary Club. Fun fact about Adam is I've known him for years. I've been to his house multiple times. And I just learned today through internet research that he attended Harvard University. Not only did he attend Harvard, but he was on their varsity football team as a wide receiver. And he's such a humble guy, I did not know this. And if you know people that went to Harvard, that's shocking, isn't it? So I did a little recon today, and I went by Adam's office, and where every other attorney in my office went to Harvard and has a humongous diploma on their wall, Adam, in place of that, has a PSA for fentanyl awareness. And I think that speaks volumes of his dedication and humbleness. So with these 2 great speakers, they're going to start off with a video and help us learn a little bit more about fentanyl. Thank you.
My name is Lamont Butler.
Jalen D. Miles Bird.
DeMarcy Johnson Jr.
Fentanyl kills, creates chaos, ruins families. It doesn't care about your race. It doesn't care how you identify.
It doesn't care if you were addicted or just trying for the first time. Fentanyl kills.
That's 70,000 brothers, sisters, fathers, and mothers lost last year.
That Adderall, Percocet, Xanax, ecstasy you were offered, it likely contains fentanyl.
That cocaine you were trying, it likely contains fentanyl. We need to help each other. Know where Narcan is.
Watch for friends making strange sounds while sleeping at parties or turning blue.
Call for help if in doubt. Be a good teammate and let's save lives.
Let's save lives.
Let's save lives. Let's save lives.
Be a good teammate and let's save lives.
Thank you, Jordan. Can you turn this on? It's on? Oh, you guys can hear me? Great. Well, thank you again. Thank you, David, for that kind introduction. And thank you to Club 33 for inviting us here today. And a special thank you to Paula. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I think this very much highlights that everyone is impacted by the fentanyl epidemic, and shining light on those experiences is how we're going to get through it. So thank you very much. So we're going to talk a little bit today about what is happening in our community with respect to the fentanyl epidemic and what Adam and I and the U.S. Attorney's Office is doing to provide education and outreach within our community. You saw that video. That's a little bit of a teaser for what we're going to talk about in the second half of our presentation here today. But Adam's going to start by talking about what's happening in our community with the fentanyl epidemic.
Thank you, Dylan. I very much appreciate everybody being here. So my name is Adam Gordon. I always like to start with this same message, which is if you want to treat an illness that has no easy cure, first of all, treat it with hope. We've talked a lot today about hope, and I believe that there is a fundamental ability for us to affect what is happening with the fentanyl epidemic. Sometimes we consider this fentanyl epidemic to be one unstoppable plague. It's not. There are parts of the fentanyl epidemic, just like how there are parts of the cancer epidemic. Some of it we're doing okay on, some of them we're not doing well on, and some of them we need to continue to improve and improve quickly. But what does that actually mean? So I know you've had Summer Steffen come in and former Chief Nislett, so I want to make this as sophisticated as we can in sort of the 10 minutes I'm doing this. Southern District, California, we have 6 ports of entry, all right? About 3.5 million people. We're a little different than Summer. Summer has San Diego County. We have San Diego and Imperial County, where most of the drugs coming through. As you can see, select the blue button. Most of the drugs come through vehicles in our ports of entry. The drugs are hidden through a variety of different compartments, right? It just makes sense. You can put more drugs in a vehicle than you can on a person. It's an army of vehicles going through the ports of entry. Some of them we stop, obviously some of them we don't. The drugs are secreted in all these different either compartments or secret compartments or potentially even on persons within that. That's the story of how the drugs are actually coming into our communities. All right. I like this statistic because statistics to me drive what our explanation is of this epidemic and then how we're supposed to address this epidemic. All right. What are the 3 drugs that are coming through our ports of entry the most? Well, you can see at the top level, methamphetamine dominates in terms of the actual amounts of drugs that are coming through our ports of entry. I mean, we're at 5 or 6x all the different other drugs that come in. The second most common drug is cocaine, right? Cocaine is still a drug that is used in excess. There's a domestic demand for cocaine. And then obviously you have fentanyl, which we're going to be talking about the most today. But if you see the fentanyl numbers, this is raw pounds for fiscal year. The government fiscal year starts in October. We've got about 13,000 pounds were seized the last fiscal year. What's 13,000 pounds? Like a full-grown elephant is about 13,000 pounds. That tells you how much fentanyl is actually coming through and being seized at our specific ports of entry, right? So main takeaway, lots of meth and then a huge amount of fentanyl. How is that actually reflected in the community? Well, as you've probably heard, our death rates at one time were exponentially climbing, right? We had San Diego County deaths from the medical examiner's office where people are testing positive for fentanyl. In 2021, we had about 814 deaths. In 2022, we had about 815 deaths, right? That is an unacceptable number of people in our community that are dying from fatal fentanyl overdoses. But you can't just stop with this top-level number, okay? Because if you don't dive into the statistics, then you're not seeing what's actually happening with the epidemic, both in our community and in every other community across the United States. I'm happy to report, and we're still waiting final numbers, that those 2023 figures for the first time since this epidemic started are actually going to be going down. So that is the trend that I'm very proud of, but again, we're still not doing enough. All right, let's focus again on the stats. This Venn diagram, and I know it's impossible to see if you're kind of far away, but I'll walk you through it, is actually something critical that the medical examiner's office provides to us. What it shows is the greatest number of folks who are suffering fentanyl overdoses also have methamphetamine in their blood at the time that they're overdosing. That's that 405 number in the Venn diagram. And then also if you add other drugs, so methamphetamine, fentanyl, and other drugs, it's another 90. So you're talking about 5/8 of the individuals who are actually dying from fentanyl overdoses being in that group. So they're not just testing positive for fentanyl, they're not just testing positive for methamphetamine. The story of the fentanyl epidemic, in terms of the majority of people who are dying, is fundamentally a story about fentanyl and methamphetamine, right? So what else do we know? We know that from the medical examiner's office, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the counterfeit pills, right? The Xanax, the Percocets, the Adderalls. Dylan's going to talk about that in a minute. But the main point is San Diego has a very distinct domestic demand for fentanyl that is replicated up and down the West Coast, but is different from other parts of the United States. We used to have a 3-to-1 pill to powder fatality ratio. And by that, I mean people either orally consuming the pills, crushing them up, snorting them, crushing them up, smoking them, right? We used to have a 3-to-1 pill to powder. That's now almost entirely flipped, where they're either at 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 individuals dying from smoking a powdered fentanyl. How do they smoke it, right? They put the blues, the counterfeit pills, on a tin foil. They light it. They'll have a tutor, usually like a broken pen or something like that, and then they'll smoke it. They can either be smoking the pills or, is more common, specifically in San Diego, they're smoking powder. And that is the group that's driving the death rate. This is the chart that I use every single time because it helps us focus our prosecution, our prevention, and our outreach strategies. Remember how I was talking about, hey, the cancer epidemic, you wouldn't treat prostate cancer the same way that you're treating esophageal cancer, right, or skin cancer. We have to break it up into its component parts. And I'm just going to walk through this. So what are the 4 different areas? We break the people who actually are suffering from this fentanyl epidemic based on whether or not they're trying to consume fentanyl or not. We have kids. Are adolescents trying to consume fentanyl? Of course not, right? They're getting a Xanax from a friend. They're getting a Percocet from a friend, an Adderall, whatever it is. They're not trying to consume fentanyl as their drug of choice. How about recreational drug users? No, they're not trying to consume fentanyl. They're trying to consume cocaine or ecstasy or other quote-unquote party drugs, right? So you have these 2 groups that are not trying to consume fentanyl. I know we have some doctors in the group, eotrogenic, right? So you had a pharmaceutical basis for your dependency. That's kind of the old story of the fentanyl epidemic, right? Bad doctors, bad pharmacies, the overprescriptions, the Sackler stuff. That's kind of the history of it. Thankfully, in San Diego, we have a terrific medical community. I'm less concerned about folks because the continuum of care is so much better than it used to be where this overprescription was happening. That, however, leads us to this last group. And it's this last group that keeps me up at night trying to think of ways that we can actually address it. Because remember, people are dying with both fentanyl and methamphetamine. What do we describe these folks as? We talk about them as folks in the depths of their addiction, okay? These are folks who are not consuming fentanyl as an adulterant, not because it's mixed in, not because it's a contaminant. These are folks who are so far gone into that addiction that they are choosing fentanyl as their drug of choice. And that has significant repercussions if that is their drug of choice, often in combination with methamphetamine. I see our partners from ECS. I know we have a bunch of folks from our community service providers. These are the groups that are on the front line trying to deal with the apocalypse that's happening for folks who are choosing fentanyl. So when you see things on the news and it's like, hey, what's driving the fentanyl epidemic? We certainly have too many kids we're losing, too many recreational drug users, kind of the historic eotrogenic users. But fundamentally, if we ever want to affect the death rate, we need to talk about this last category. We need to talk about people for whom their drug of choice is fentanyl, often in combination with methamphetamine. All right, you may, similar to me, have just been like, why on earth would somebody use fentanyl and methamphetamine? Right? It doesn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense to me when I started the job, and it wasn't until I was talking to these folks into their phones, prosecuting these cases, that I had a better understanding. Part of it also comes from the scientific literature. So I do it in the 5 S's. These are why folks consume both fentanyl and methamphetamine. All right? 1 is safety. Some people think that if they use methamphetamine at the same time as you use fentanyl, it's basically like a way to pre-Narcan yourself. So they think they'll maybe be able to survive that way. Second, we've got satisfaction. Some people think that if they use fentanyl, either before or after they use methamphetamine or consecutively, that it'll actually elongate the high. Then we've got sickness. Some people are just so, the pain of a fentanyl addiction becomes so dramatic that you try to quote unquote get well. And if you don't have the fentanyl that's available, you may use methamphetamine because that's the drug that you have on hand. Then we actually have strength. If you're a long-term fentanyl addict, getting up in the morning is very, very difficult. So just so you have the strength to actually get up, get out of bed, go to a grocery store, go whatever you need to do to hopefully, for them, buy more fentanyl, that'll give them the energy if they take the methamphetamine. And lastly, because methamphetamine is so widely available in San Diego. Oftentimes their partner will use methamphetamine. They'll be in a place where methamphetamine is widely available. So they'll use methamphetamine not because it's their drug of choice, but because that's just a drug that they happen to be around. All right, this is something that I stole from an academic paper up in Washington, but it gives you a perspective in terms of people saying their drug of choice is methamphetamine versus fentanyl. Okay? So if you notice, we're basically at the same number of folks who self-report fentanyl being their drug of choice and methamphetamine being their drug of choice. It's basically equal right there. Then you have fentanyl users, but notice how fentanyl users are most of the time using methamphetamine. That's like 88, 90%, right? So if your drug of choice is fentanyl, it's very, very likely you're gonna be using methamphetamine. As opposed to methamphetamine users, where it's only about 1 in 4 who are actually using fentanyl. So again, this is a way to focus what we're trying to do on our prevention, outreach, and prosecution because we've identified this particular group that's very, very susceptible. All right, what is this group? Okay, you've got folks with dual diagnosis. What does that mean? That means you have a DSM diagnosis, could be bipolar, could be schizoaffective disorder, whatever it's gonna be. A lot of times they have a trimorbidity, Hep C, HIV, and they're unsheltered. You can think of it, unsurprisingly, as like the folks you see downtown who are in the depths of their addiction, right? This is a very difficult population. What's unique about San Diego is the potential for this. We smoke powdered fentanyl. A lot of places, especially to the east, inject fentanyl, right? So one of my grave concerns is that smoking powdered fentanyl, because you never need to use a needle, becomes much more prevalent as it migrates from the West Coast to the East Coast. The other issue is the powders continue to get stronger and stronger. The pills basically have remained the same in terms of their relative strength based on our seizures, but the amount of the actual active ingredient in our fentanyl powder seizures continues to increase. So you have folks using a more dangerous consumption method and a more dangerous drug. So I leave you on that sort of dramatic note, but just know that we're doing everything we can in the prevention and outreach space. And Dylan, I want to turn it over to you now.
Thank you. And I'm going to move a little bit quickly because we're limited on time, and I think people are going to want to have questions for us. So Adam, if you can go to the next slide. I'm going to tell you guys about the bottom here, what we're doing in terms of outreach and education through the U.S. Attorney and at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And you saw that table that Adam put up with the 4 different categories, the 4 different groups of people that are being impacted by the fentanyl epidemic. And what we have done is we have focused on that recreational user in terms of providing education and outreach the last few years, and specifically the college-age student, the probably peak recreational user. So Adam, if you can go to the next slide. What we've done to do that is we've gone into colleges to talk to the students about what fentanyl is, what to avoid, and how to be safe. And this is a photo of Adam and I speaking at San Diego State to their student leaders, their RA, their resident advisors, their various organizations leaders, to give them that education so that they could be our voice within the school. They could be able to relay our information so we'd educate them and they can educate their peers. And let me tell you a little bit about what that education was. So this next slide here, we talk about some of the myths and facts about the fentanyl epidemic. And I think maybe the biggest myth is that fentanyl is only a concern for opioid users, and people can tell what fentanyl is based on how it looks or how it tastes. Not true. What we've been able to see through our seizures is that there is a greater than 70% chance, greater than 70% chance that the counterfeit Adderall, Percocet, or Xanax pill contains a deadly dose of fentanyl. A deadly dose of fentanyl. And that those recreational drugs like Coke and ecstasy, those likely also contain fentanyl. So we want to let these students know that be aware what you're taking. If you don't know that it's from a pharmacy, it likely contains fentanyl. And the next fact is that you cannot tell what is the fake pill or powder. The law enforcement officers, and I'm not talking about Adam or David or me, a couple of nerds that sit at desks in their suits. I'm talking about the law enforcement officers, the folks with the boots on the ground and the guns on their hips that are fighting this epidemic every single day and seeing what's happening on the streets. They can't tell what's fake. There's no way a recreational user can tell what's fake, no matter how it looks. So I know what some of you are thinking. You think you can probably tell the difference between what's fake and real. So I have a little test. Which of these pills is counterfeit? We have A, the front and back of pill A, and the front and back of pill B. I'll give you 10 seconds to look at this because we're limited on time. Here's the answer. B is fake. It looks to me like A is fake based on the kind of ground down Malencroft stamp and the discoloration, but not true. So we want to provide these students with education on be safe, know what's out there, and know that you cannot detect what is real and what is fake. The second important thing we want to provide them with is knowing the importance of naloxone, which is under the brand name Narcan, and how it can save lives. So you can see this image here of what is the amount of a deadly dose of fentanyl. It's not very much. You've maybe seen this image before. It's not very much. But look at the other image. What's just as equally important, I think, is what can save a life. I've heard Adam say a couple times that if he had one wish, it would be that everyone carries Narcan. And I think I agree with that. I definitely do agree with that. I think my wish would probably be to get rid of illicit fentanyl, cut it off at the source, but that's not doable. So what we're looking for is that everyone carries everyone carries Narcan, because that is very doable and it can save a life. So one quick fact and myth about Narcan. First of all, I want to let them know what Narcan is, but also that Narcan is safe to use no matter when you're using it. If someone's not overdosing and it's mistakenly used, not a problem. Narcan can be given safely to anyone, anytime, anywhere. So we encourage students to know that. We encourage students to carry Narcan with them. We also tell them about the different signs of overdose, which is on this next slide. But I want to go to the last slide because we're very limited on time here. And this is the teaser that I left you guys with about the PSA that we put together, that Adam and I put together with the city attorney's office on what you probably noticed was a $0 budget, in conjunction with the Mesa Foundation, the NIL collective at San Diego State that facilitated this connection. And this is a little bit of a self-brag page here, because what it shows is that the overdose deaths for folks 18 and under and 21 under have gone down significantly in the last year. In 2001 to 2022, ages 18 under was 19 to 8. 8 is 8 too many, but it's a lot better than 19. And just like that, those college-age kids went down about 50% in the amount of overdose deaths from consuming fentanyl. So we're proud of this. We're going to continue to do this in every effort we can. We think that this creates a interest in students so that they will not consume illicit drugs as much, hopefully. It will stop that demand of fentanyl. And we want to encourage all of you to know this information too, know the importance of Narcan, and know the importance that any pill likely contains fentanyl. And spread that message for us, please. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We have time for 2 questions, I believe, or first one from Mike.
Thank you for a great presentation. Something that's really scary, things that I didn't grow up with. The worst we had was weed. We didn't die from that. Question is, you said you understand that to stop it at the source is impossible. What would it take to cut the head off the snake that is producing all of the fentanyl and shipping it here?
Yeah, let me take it.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so fentanyl comes to the United States through Mexico, right? It's usually precursors that come throughout Southeast Asia, a lot of times China. It comes through the ports of entry, meaning the Mexican harbors, then goes to the cartels. There's 2 dominant cartels, and then it gets smuggled in the United States. The moral of the story is that there's such a significant domestic demand for fentanyl that even if Mexico just fell off the map tomorrow, there would be people stepping up to replace that domestic demand. So I 100% believe that supply side is part of the solution. This is just an outreach and prevention. We could talk about prosecution efforts for a long time. But the moral of the story is we need to affect the domestic demand in those 4 groups at the same time we're addressing the supply side of fentanyl in our communities.
And we're prosecutors first also. You know, this is very important to us as outreach and education to stop that demand, but we're going to continue to prosecute.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here and talking to us about a heartbreaking topic. My name is Solveig Dupre. Before I went to law school, I worked for the Public Defender's Office in Portland, Oregon, where we represented persons who were before the probate court for consideration about whether they should be committed to the state mental institution for 6 months. I'm concerned about the hopeless addicts that we have on our streets and wondering, in our system where we don't have a coercive mechanism to force people to get treatment, how can we help those hopeless addicts?
Yeah, and I'll go on this one. So, you know, we are Department of Justice employees, so I can't take policy positions. What I do tell to elected officials is the reason we give the presentation we do is to talk about that the clock's ticking for these folks, right? The idea that you can just, hey, be a long-term fentanyl addict. There are no long-term fentanyl addicts anymore, right? There used to be 20-year heroin addicts. Those people don't exist. If you look at the Sandag stats and they actually talk about the number of overdoses per year that folks who are incarcerated have, it's like 2 to 4 overdoses per year on average. So we know, at least not in a policy discussion, just in terms of what needs to be done, that we need to act quickly for the folks in the depths of their addiction, that we don't have time to just be sitting here and watching them die.
Thanks, and then we have time for one more.
Oh, so thank you so much for all you do. So my son went to Mexico with a friend. He does take opioids, and he also takes Ativan for some depression and anxiety. Purchased something that was laced with the fentanyl, and that's when he got back over the states and had the overdose. 911 was called in time to get the Narcan. Thank the Lord. So whole new world for me here, but appreciate all you do. My question is, are you going into the high school age, or are you just concentrating on college? Because there's a lot in the high schools in San Diego County, and it's got to start a little earlier.
Sure. So one of the slides I had that I had to skip over was that there are various coalitions formed within our community that we're a part of. And one of those groups, a former DEA agent, Rocky Heron, is leading the force in talking with, I would say, high school and elementary age school kids, along with many others. I think we're focusing on the college age student as maybe a gap that we saw a couple years ago. And we'll continue to support the efforts of folks talking in that younger age group. But I don't individually, and I don't know, Adam, if you do, but I think others certainly do.
Yeah, we've done presentations for high schools, but it's the San Diego County Board of Education that really takes them. But we'll stick around afterwards because I know there may be additional questions, but thank you guys.
How many of you knew all of that? Yeah, so this is important. And Paula, once again, I want to thank you for your courage. You know, Mike, you talked about that weed. They were lacing weed back then. I know, and you talked about law enforcement doesn't know whether it's real or not. There's chemists that don't know what's in this stuff. And that's been going on for a long time. So if you've got kids, if you've got access to youth, if you've got people that could be in these conditions, this presentation will be recorded. And I want you to share with anywhere you think it needs to be seen. High schools, whoever, parents who just don't have a clue. They don't want to talk about these topics, but we did right here at San Diego Rotary. So to Dylan and Adam, you talked about hope. Rotary International theme is create hope in the world. And this coin I want to give you is just for the hope that you share with us. This seems hopeless, doesn't it, in a lot of ways, but I think they've given us a lot of avenues that there could be an impact. And the demand reduction part of it, you know, the enforcement part. But more importantly, the question is, what can we do as the 10th largest club in the world to make an impact here in San Diego County? So this is for you. Thank you. And my hope is that we could reimagine how Rotary can really develop young global leaders and support the adult champions in their lives around the world. So we're going to give in your name to the high school or high schools of your choice. And Rotarians, this goes for you as well. If you want to bring the Blanchard's Student Self-Leadership Program to your schools, it's for you, and we'll do it at no charge. Let's give them one more big hand if you can.